In a technological society, many rely on the media to get their fair share of mystery and horror. Little do they know that real terror lurks in unseen corners of a very real world. Number 10. It was late evening, 10:30 p.m. on the 29th of August in 2015, when Elijah Bear Diaz was dropped at his home by his mother. She stopped on the roadside of Joey Avenue in El Cajon, California to let him out. At 11:19 that evening, she would receive a message from her beloved son, and that was the last she would ever hear from him. The next day at 4 p.m., she headed to the Joey Avenue home after not hearing from Bear. His mother would uncover an unsettling scene that would spark off an enduring mystery. Elijah Diaz was gone. He disappeared along with crutches, which he needed after sustaining a foot injury, his 50-inch TV, his bed sheets, the contents of his safe, and a red backpack that contained a week's worth of diabetic medication. His prescription glasses, toothbrush, and cell phone charger were all left behind. Bear's mother reported him missing that same day. Despite a thorough investigation, though, many questions were left unanswered. How did he make off with a 50-inch TV and other items all while on crutches? It just didn't make sense. Bear couldn't walk at the time that he went missing, nor could he drive due to the wounds on both of his feet, which only fueled the flames of mystery. An investigation into this eerie disappearance found that his cell phone had been turned off the following day, with no activity seen on his bank account, nor had he been active on any of his social media. The cell phone last pinged near Santa Isabel, sparking search and rescue efforts to flock to the area. It was thoroughly combed by units, yielding only minor clues and still no Elijah. This, however, wasn't the only place that Bear's phone pinged. 30 minutes prior, at 1:29 a.m., it was found to have been at the Barona Reservation near a casino. Investigators also decided to spray luminol in his room, hoping to uncover traces of a possible crime, but no vital fluid or any other clues were found. The room was void of all possible evidence, and time was running out. 20-year-old Bear is known to be a member of the Barona tribe in San Diego County. The tribe is said to issue checks to members, but the missing man hasn't picked up or deposited any of the checks since he went missing. The disappearance was especially eerie since he had limited mobility, suggesting that he'd been taken from his apartment. It wasn't like Bear to leave without warning and not stay in contact, and it was even more uncharacteristic of him not to attend tribal events. But the disappearance only gets stranger from here. One day, another 20-year-old named Skylar Peterson Tozik disappeared without a trace. He had messaged his mother, Olivia, to tell her that he would be out hiking with two friends, but Olivia didn't recognize their names. Thaddeus and Eli would become the center of this enduring mystery, but their identities would remain unknown to us. On the day that he disappeared, Olivia received another message, this time at 8 p.m. Skylar's message was odd and incoherent. He was saying something about two rich women who allegedly had connections to a passport. After seeing this message, Olivia wondered if her son had joined a cult. The worried mother quickly dove into a search after learning that an Uber had dropped him off near San Pasqual Academy. It was during this search that she came to learn of Elijah Diaz, who vanished a day prior. She thought that perhaps Eli could be him, but after speaking with the police, they believed that these two disappearances weren't connected at all. But in another creepy twist, both of the missing individuals looked very much alike. Both were thin, dark-haired, and young, and both vanished into thin air. The El Cajon police can be reached at 619-441-5530 with any information relating to Elijah. And the Escondido Police Department can be contacted at 760-839-4722 with any information that may be related to Skylar. Number 9. Where is Andrea Nabel? This is the question that continues to haunt a Louisville family. The whereabouts of Andrea is the first thing on her father's mind at the start and end of each day, since her enigmatic vanishing in 2019, 5 years ago. It was the 13th of August 2019 when Andrea was last seen leaving her sister Erin's home in the early hours of the morning. She'd be embarking on the mile-long journey back to her mother's Louisville house, where she'd been residing. The 39-year-old woman disappeared somewhere that day, leaving behind her two young sons. Initially, police would be led to believe that Andrea had vanished on the road that morning, But a private investigator revealed something else, a detail that would shock the family. The investigator tracked Andrea's phone's GPS, which placed her at the Louisville house belonging to her mother that very night, and after this, a timeline of events was secured. The day prior, Andrea sustained injuries to her face, and she needed a ride to the hospital for treatment. She took a lift to her mother's Chickadee Road home and decided to head over to errands the next day. That evening, she headed out on the mile-long journey to Fincastle Road, visited with her sister, and then began on her return trip. At around 1 a.m., Andrea was spotted walking in the Audubon Park and Camp Taylor neighborhoods. Phone records revealed that around this time she had also made a phone call to a friend to ask for a ride, but the call went unanswered and directed her to voicemail. At some point that evening, she managed to return to Chickadee Road, only to hesitate at the door. While wandering back and forth in the shadows, Andrea disappeared. It was this detail that would lead the family to believe that their missing relative didn't enter the house, but instead met up with someone outside, someone who's yet to be identified. Authorities have searched Louisville and beyond for the missing person, and have followed up on the occasional sightings that have been reported in different areas of Jefferson County and southern Indiana. Information can be directed to the LMPD at 502-574-7120. Number 8. On the 5th of September in 2012, a cyclist and British ex-RAF pilot Brett Martin decided to take a peaceful ride through the French Alps in a lay-by of the mountainside. The trip would take him through Annecy, where a nearby lake of the same name is known as the cleanest body of water in Europe. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to uncover a violent and grisly scene, one that shook the community. As he reached the area, he found a red-stained scene with the BMW stopped, still running in a secluded spot, and a nearby cyclist lying in the road. Just moments before, a brutal execution had unfolded there, one that targeted members of a British family. 25 cracks echoed through the small community, but it seemed that no one heard a thing. Martin was likely crossing the last river bridge just a few meters away from the location, possibly masking the sound of a semi-automatic. Inside the BMW was an Iraqi-born British tourist, Saad al-Hili, his wife Iqbal, and her mother. Saad was an engineer, and his wife was a dentist. These three family members succumbed to their wounds after a spray of slugs shattered windows and the peace of Annecy. Among the remains was an unrelated victim, a French cyclist named Sylvain Mollier, who received 7 of the total wounds. Immediately, an international investigation arose, but as they began to piece together the events that unfolded, questions came with no answers. Many wondered why the victims had been in this isolated area in the first place, and theories abound as to whether this was a targeted attack or something more sinister, such as the spree of a lone psychopath. Upon the investigation, it was found that the vehicle had reversed sharply, leaving marks behind as the loose sand spun beneath the hind wheels. The 3 victims inside the car each succumbed to 2 or 3 wounds, leading to the idea that they may not have been the intended target. Oddly, there were no witnesses to the event, which would ultimately leave it unsolved. With no clues, evidence, or witnesses, law enforcement had very little to go on. But in recent years, renewed interest reopened the unsolved case, which led to a man who would be detained in connection with the event. He was one among several others who were detained as suspects, but a lack of evidence and motive would rule them out. Later, authorities would order more DNA analysis on clothing belonging to one victim, cigarette butts, and a piece of a firearm that was used in the attack, in hopes that improved technology may finally solve this disturbing incident. Still, the Annecy incident remains unsolved. One of the various unexplained twists in the case included that Iqbal's previous husband succumbed to a heart attack on the day of the fatal attack, but police believe that the cases are unrelated. Number 7. 2008 was a traumatic, confusing, and unnerving year for the family of the unassuming and shy 21-year-old Sky Lynn Budnick, a college student. The 31st of March of 2008 was a day like any other. Sky headed over to her family's house and told them that she'd be staying with a friend the following day. But as the days pressed on with no contact from her, family and friends began to grow worried. On the 4th of April, they opted to report young Sky missing. That very day, they also gained access to her email account and found something quite alarming. It was a confirmation of the one-way trip to Hokkaido through Tokyo. She'd left the United States on the 1st of April and didn't tell a soul. Sky's sister Megan and her mother Susan decided to take the investigation over themselves and headed for Japan. It didn't take long for them to track Sky's movements. They discovered that on the 7th of April, she'd booked a stay at an inn in southern Hokkaido, and had told the staff that she was planning to travel to Sapporo, Japan. Sky left most of her belongings behind, taking only her Nintendo DS and computer, both of which had internet capabilities. Neither of these items has since been recovered. This case is particularly unsettling since Sky was so shy to the point that she was suffering from social anxiety. Megan and the rest of the family believed that she wouldn't have embarked on this one-way journey and disappeared off the face of the earth without having been coerced into doing so. Someone was encouraging her to go there, but no one knows who. During their stay in Japan, the family also found that Sky's movements were very tourist-like. She made stops at local spas, hot springs, and resorts, but her sightings dwindled after the 7th of April. Since she was a child, the now missing college student took a keen interest in Japanese culture, and even went as far as taking 3 years worth of Japanese language classes. Adding to the intrigue of this case is that no one knows how she even paid for this incredibly pricey plane ticket. Megan, who's dedicated to keeping the case of her sister alive, has made a website dedicated to it. She's called it Surviving Sky and posts regular updates, episodes, and any additional information. Some have added the Aokigahara Forest into the discussion when it comes to the case of Sky Budnick, but the area that she traveled to was much farther from the forest. The Japanese government maintains that Sky would have needed a visa to live there, which has prompted some to suggest that she may be living under the radar. During their trip to Japan, Megan and Susan didn't turn up any clues. Information can be directed to the Southington Police Department at 860-378-1698. Number 6. Robert Deson Childers is a name that haunts Florence, Alabama. It was the 17th of September in 2016 when Robert was spotted walking away from his home. His residence was located on the 1200 block of Lauderdale County, Highway 141. According to David Nix, his roommate left the home without any indication as to where he was going. This was between 9 and 12 p.m. that evening. Before heading down the road, he would lock his truck, kicking off a strange and enduring mystery. The 51-year-old man is said to be classified as disabled and is known to require medication. Whether or not he took this medication with him is unknown. 2 days later, on the 19th of September, Robert was reported as missing to the Lauderdale County Sheriff's Department. An investigation began, and almost immediately, something strange was uncovered. Located in a wooded area around County Road 178, close to the Tennessee state line, was a hunter's camera. When the authorities took a look at it, they spotted Robert carrying what looked to be a red cooler box. The image was taken on the day he walked away from his residence, but his shirt was ripped and his pants were torn. There's since been no activity on his bank account or social security number. He left without his keys, phone, and wallet. Later, it was discovered that Robert's friends were particularly worried about him, believing that he was in danger. Police would soon learn that he was involved in a bitter property dispute. 20 years earlier, Robert's father bought a house and land. The two lived there up until it was confiscated, a direct result of unpaid taxes. It was subsequently placed on auction and snatched up by a man named Leroy Darby. Darby was attempting to have both of the men evicted at the time of Robert's father's passing, which came in 2014. About 5 months before his disappearance, Darby would have the power to his home cut off. This was done in an effort to persuade the resident to leave. Months later, a similar attempt was made. This time, though, Robert was granted a temporary court order to cease the eviction. A hearing would later be scheduled to confirm who the legal property owner was. Oddly, though, Robert vanished just before the court date. It's unknown if this dispute is at all connected to the disappearance, but its existence certainly adds to its eeriness. Authorities would later connect David Nix to the vanishing, but they never publicly named him as a suspect. David Nix was the roommate who is believed to be the last person to see Robert, but this sighting has been left unconfirmed. Nix also gave many inconsistent statements that led to suspicion. He maintains his innocence, but did reveal that he and the missing person didn't get along and did engage in physical altercations in the past. Suspiciously, Nix also used bleach in the house following the mysterious disappearance. Foul play is suspected in this case, but no significant clues have since come about. Information regarding this missing person can be directed to the Lauderdale County Sheriff's Department at 256-760-5757. Number 5. It was Tuesday, the 2nd of November in 2010, when the morning news echoed a disturbing ordeal. Madeline, an 80-year-old mother, knew right away that the news anchors were talking about her daughter. Guilford woman, they had said. And even though they'd not uttered her name, Madeline could sense that they were talking about her 54-year-old daughter, Roberta Bobby Miller. The afternoon prior, a violent scene unfolded in a Guilford house that claimed the life of Bobby and her trusty dog, Sport. Just days before, the mother and daughter had spoken with Bobby, seemingly in good spirits as she always was. She'd been getting settled into her new home after having just gone through a bitter divorce with Gary. Gary Miller and Bobby met in the 70s when she was working as a waitress. By 1981, the two were married and soon had 2 children, Jennifer and Jonathan. By this time, Gary was no longer a mechanic, but actually owned several businesses, and Bobby took a keen interest in hiking and kayaking. The family would later shatter in 2007, a time in which both Jennifer and Jonathan arrived in adulthood. The relationship became rocky, which began a long and nasty process of divorce. On the 13th of August in 2010, the final decree was signed, and Bobby purchased her new home on the opposite side of Lake Winnipesaukee in Guilford Town. The modest home was on Country Club Road. Later, Gary's lawyer would file a motion claiming that Bobby was not upholding her end of the bargain with the sale of the old property, and she was due to be in court relating to this issue. The weekend prior to the court date was Halloween. On a Friday evening, she'd gone on a date, and the next day she went to dinner with her friend Diane, after which they returned to Country Club Road to watch some movies. The next day, October 31st, Bobby was said to be doing some work around the house, and she went to Lowe's around 5 p.m., just 5 miles away from her home. The town wasn't the sort that welcomed trick-or-treating, but that didn't stop an unknown person from walking up the steps and entering Bobby's home. The maniac must have known that she was there since her car had been parked in the driveway. Bobby was in the kitchen when a blast ricocheted through the house, taking her life instantly. With no sign of forced entry, 3 theories came about. Either the maniac had a key, the doors were left unlocked, or Bobby let them inside. The idea of robbery was ruled out since nothing had been taken, including $26,000 in cash. Later investigations revealed that there was $35,200 in both cash and checks to the family. The slayer left no trace and no clues, but suspicion immediately fell on Gary. But there was a twist. Gary had become a target as well. The former couple owned a house on Great East Lake together, a single-story camping structure. On Friday, October 29th, around 9:30 that evening, the camp caught fire. Initially, it was thought that a fire had gotten out of control, but further evidence revealed something more intentional. The fire was only extinguished in the early morning the following day, and it was deemed a total loss. This brought about the question, was this targeted fire related to the homicide that took place just 48 hours later? After questioning and polygraph tests, Gary was ruled out as a suspect, and the son Jonathan was named a person of interest, but nothing came of this. Ken, Bobby's brother, vowed to find the person who had done this to his beloved sister. He keeps a book of memories of her and is offered a $55,000 reward for information leading to the conviction of the maniac. To this day, the eerie events that took the life of Robert Miller on a Halloween weekend and the flames that tore down the camp remain an enduring mystery. Number 4. It was the 4th of July, 2013, Independence Day. Excitement was high as parade floats made their way through Oregon. To see the parade, Stephanie Ann Warner opted to drive from her home in the Rutch community along with her boyfriend, Lenny Ames. Stephanie lived previously in New Orleans, Louisiana, and even owned a restaurant known as Magnolia Grill. She'd also been volunteering for the Jackson County Fuel Committee, an organization dedicated to assisting low-income families, providing them with access to heating fuel. This would also be her reason for attending the parade, and she was spotted on camera walking alongside the Jackson County Fuel Committee float. As the parade came to an end, Stephanie and Ames opted to leave and headed back to Rutch. Later that afternoon, Stephanie was seen at a mini-market known as Stewart Market. Around 5 p.m., she dropped Ames off at the Rutch Country Store and the two parted ways. But this would be the last time that anyone would see or hear from Stephanie. After a few days, with still no sign of her daughter, Stephanie's mother filed a missing person report at the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. She was unable to make contact with her daughter, and concerns began to rise. The investigation into the ordeal found that she had left behind all of her personal belongings at her Rutch community home, including pets who'd been left unattended. The dark green 2004 Nissan Xterra SUV belonging to Stephanie was also found parked in the driveway, which sat along Highway 238. With no signs of forced entry or evidence of foul play, authorities were left with very little to go on in locating the missing 43-year-old. It didn't take long for suspicion to fall on 41-year-old Lenny Ames, who was the last person to have seen Stephanie that evening. Ames's residence was situated on a mountain at a campsite. He would go on to retrace their steps that day and tell investigators that the two parted ways at the Rutch Country Store. The convenience store is located at 7350 Highway 238, just 2 miles from Stephanie's home. Ames explained that after being dropped at the store, he paid a group of young men to drive him to the campsite. The following day, he headed for Stephanie's, but found that she wasn't there. Oddly, he then borrowed her vehicle to head to the Williams store, also situated on Highway 238. He later returned it to the driveway and headed back for the campsite, where he would remain for several days. 2 years went by with still no sign of Stephanie, and on the 8th of July in 2015, Ames was named the prime suspect. Authorities became convinced that the missing woman never left the area, but instead was met with foul play. A few weeks after the disappearance, Ames would stop cooperating with the authorities and leave the state. The mystery doesn't end here, though. In 2023, the case was reopened due to a rather startling discovery. While out in a natural area, a local mushroom hunter came across human hair that was believed to be tissue. The discovery was made just 2.5 miles from where Stephanie had been living. After the mushroom hunter reported the suspicious remains, the police went to collect them and confirmed that they were in fact human. But they were unable to determine if they belonged to Stephanie or not. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office headed out with search and rescue teams as well as cadaver dogs. This effort was to see if any more remains could be found, but there was nothing. When the police began reviewing every detail, they re-examined every casebook and all evidence, and even re-interviewed everyone. Still, Stephanie Ann Warner remains missing. She's known to have many distinctive features, including several tattoos. She has a tree branch and owl on her ankle and foot, a tattoo of a woman's head, a colorful bird and flowers on her thigh, and a mermaid on her chest. Any information regarding this missing person can be directed to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office at 541-774-6800. Number 3. 5 years ago, Dunning, Perthshire was struck by a tragic ordeal, one that would rock the community. It was the homicide of 22-year-old Analise Johnstone, and her passing would send chills down anyone's spine. On the 10th of May in 2018, a shocking discovery was made, but the timeline of events began to unfold just a day prior. It was the 9th, lunchtime, when Analise left Ayrshire, her hometown. She was embarking on a journey with her brother Jordan and his partner Angela Newlands. The couple had been forced to leave their home that month after flooding damaged the property beyond repair. At 2 p.m. that day, security footage showed the couple stopping at a Sainsbury's. 2 hours later, Analise was on CCTV heading to the Alpine store of Andresen, and then dropping off her trusty dog, Sadie, with Donna Patton, a close friend. She tells Donna that she'll be heading out with her brother, but will return within the hour. But an hour turned into 7, with Analise assuring her friend that she would be back to collect Sadie, apologizing for taking so long. That evening, Jordan, Angela, Analise, and Angela's 4 children would leave a house in a Ford Galaxy to get food. Just after midnight the following day, the Ford was spotted at a garage in Kingsway, Dundee, and then arrived at Camperdown Park. Security footage from a private address showed the Ford in the vicinity of Maggie Wall's monument between 1:28 and 2 a.m. that morning. The monument is said to be commemorating a woman named Maggie Wall, who was supposedly accused of witchcraft. The car then leaves the site a few minutes later before returning. It stayed there for 15 minutes before departing for the last time. This is where a chilling and persevering mystery would begin. On a midday stroll, a retired Nairn couple, Stephen and Elaine Bailey, came across an unsettling sight. It was the body of Analise Johnstone, who'd been placed behind a dry stone dike, just a short distance from the witch monument. Her throat had been lacerated, causing an immediate demise. Initially, they believed that the remains were a mannequin or an artificial creation due to the pale skin. Elaine also recalled a strange detail, an apparent luminous color at the base of the victim's neck. They quickly discovered, though, that Analise was no mannequin. The following day, during the early hours of the morning, Jordan would ring the police and report her sister missing, detailing his address as Raven Grove. When police officers arrived at the home, though, it was empty, and Jordan would be tracked down to Angela's parents' home. Back at Scotland's Dundee headquarters, Jordan was about to make a statement about his sister when he was interrupted by unsettling news. He was told of a deceased woman being found whose appearance matched the description he had given of his sister. According to detectives, Jordan had become incredibly upset and emotional. Despite this, the 25-year-old was abruptly put on trial, along with the co-accused Angela. It didn't take long for Angela to be cleared of the charges after a witness alleged to have heard her voice outside of her home, miles away from where the homicide took place. This gave her an alibi. Jordan, however, would maintain that his former partner played a significant role in his sister's demise. According to him, he carried his 22-year-old sister in his arms before placing her behind the dry stone, fearing that the father of Angela would segment her and throw her away. Even though Jordan admitted to this and made such accusations, he too was cleared of the charges. This came after the jury returned with a not proven verdict, and the judge confirmed that the accusations that the two made against one another couldn't be used as evidence in this case. To this day, the case of Analise Johnstone's homicide before the witch monument remains an eerie mystery that continues to shock Perthshire. Number 2. Smiths Falls, Ontario, a small and close-knit community, would have their peace shattered with a series of disappearances that have gone unsolved. A shadow was cast on the town on the 30th of September in 2022. It was the disappearance of Lawrence Bertram. On this day, Lawrence was last seen in the downtown area of Smiths Falls. At the time of his enigmatic vanishing, he was 43 years old. An investigation was carried out in the Canadian town, but there were no results. But this was just the beginning of a strange and unnerving ordeal. 14 months later, Robbie Thompson, a 34-year-old resident, was reported missing on the 19th of October. Police believed that he vanished sometime between October 12th and 18th. He was among 9,300 locals, but no one saw a thing. Robbie was known to frequent both the Smiths Falls area and Prescott. Despite a lengthy search entailing both ground and water efforts, he was found to be at neither of these locations. The Ontario Provincial Police conducted full-scale efforts, which brought in the emergency response team, canine units, aviation services, and the underwater search and recovery unit. These extensive efforts, though, yielded no results. Robbie was simply gone. While in search for Robbie, police were still following up with any leads on Lawrence, who was last seen leaving his Church Street West residence. This is where authorities would uncover a connection between both missing people. They were friends. In fact, they were very good friends and were well known in the local community. Many began to wonder if these two ordeals were somehow connected. As more searches and investigations were underway, Smiths Falls was struck by another disappearance and tragedy. On the 4th of November in 2023, 34-year-old Montague Township resident Steve Tate was reported missing. In another turn of events, it was discovered that he too was connected to Robbie and Lawrence, making him the third member of the Smiths Falls friend group and the third of that group to disappear. But just 4 days later, Steve was found under unfortunate circumstances adjacent to Highway 15. It was a clear case of a hit and run, but no clues surfaced that would lead authorities to the person responsible. With this new discovery came a swirl of rumors that flooded the town. Whispers on the streets spoke of the men's fates, questioning what could have happened and further distressing the community. Despite thorough investigations, appeals for tips, and substantial rewards offered in these individual cases, they remain unsolved. Robbie and Lawrence are still missing to this day, and Steve's perpetrator remains elusive. Lawrence Bertram has been described as a medium-built individual with brown hair and blue eyes. Information in connection with this disappearance can be directed to 1-844-677-9404. Robbie Thompson, who would now be 35 years old, is said to have brown hair and brown eyes, and has a medium build as well. Information on Robbie can be directed to 1-855-677-4636. Number 1. It was the 12th of December in 2014, a day in Beaver County, Pennsylvania that started as any other. That was until an unsettling discovery was made. It was unknown at the time that this finding would become one of the most persisting mysteries to ever be bestowed upon the community of Pennsylvania. It was on that day that a teenager had been walking along the road when he spotted something out of the ordinary. Something that sent shivers down his spine. Sitting atop an undisturbed pile of leaves was a human head. This suggested that the removed artifact had been placed there recently. But by whom? It didn't take long for investigators to arrive on the scene, expecting one of gore and violence. But they found only cleanliness, with a lack of vital fluids and any other indication of a violent attack. With the lack of these indications, though, came the question. Where was the body of the person to whom this head belonged? Short gray hair adorned the crown, suggesting an older woman believed to be between the ages of 60 and 80. Adding more intrigue to this odd incident is that it had been perfectly removed from its counterpart, suggesting medical expertise. The mystery, though, didn't end there, and as authorities dug deeper, more and more questions arose. The head had been deliberately placed in its position, 31 feet from the roadway. A meticulous maniac intentionally staged it. Analysis revealed that the remnant had been preserved in embalming fluid. This meant that there was no way for anyone to determine if the victim had their life taken recently or years earlier. All DNA was eliminated, and no other remains were discovered nearby, making it significantly more difficult for law enforcement to figure out who the victim was. Aside from being very well preserved, there was one terrifying detail that the police were yet to discover about the find. A detail that would send them down the path of considering satanic activity. The eyes of the head were missing and were replaced with red rubber balls. The investigators turned to experts in the field of embalming rituals and found that this isn't a usual procedure for body preservation. And so they began their journey of tracing the origins of the red rubber balls. But this quickly turned futile. Then, unexpectedly, there was a break in the case when police were led to a 1988 crypt. The crypt was subjected to vandalism, and the person within it was without a head. Dental records and testing, though, found that the deceased in the tomb was not connected to the Beaver County head, and they were again met with a stalemate. They were still no closer to determining who this Jane Doe was. Police then turned to the public for assistance and ended up hiring a forensic artist. Michelle Vitali made an accurate replica of the artifact using clay, which allowed law enforcement to share details about the feature without releasing some graphic visuals that would otherwise upset the citizens. With the distribution of sketches and sculptures, hope was renewed in figuring out who this person was, but still no tips came in and no new leads presented themselves. Not too long after this, something even stranger would happen. The authorities were called by Jay Gabner, a local who resided just across the street from where the head had been discovered. Police thought that this would be the end of the mystery, but then the man unexpectedly pointed his finger at the teen who discovered the feature, which only placed suspicion on Grabner, who had become the prime suspect. It was learned that the teenager and Grabner were once acquainted, but a falling out made him vengeful against the young man. Adding further suspicion to this individual was the fact that he was an expert in the trade of human anatomy. Grabner's strange interests and his connection to the teen would lead police to question him more closely and even subject him to a polygraph test. But this investigation, though, would lead nowhere and came to an abrupt end, leaving the case of the Beaver County head unsolved. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future videos. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.